Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Batwoman. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I thought this was kind of interesting, for one, learning how small world Gotham is to a certain extent, because it turns out Ryan has a connection to Sophie, because they've crossed paths before. But it seems like it's usually under circumstances where like Ryan didn't do something, but she got caught up in something, and Sophie ends up kind of giving her the third degree. It seems like that's kind of like the back and forth they have, which is interesting because it turns out Ryan was someone who was also saved by Batwoman, and so for her to end up taking the mantle at some point, I mean, it seems like that was like 2 months ago. So just, a small world and everything, but the way Sophie was talking about it, it's like, oh, you're not for your ex drug dealer girlfriend. It's like, oh, so this is about an ex that basically kind of screwed her over. It seemed like it was insinuating like maybe the drugs that were found on her, like that she kind of took the fall for her ex, which is like, oh, that makes it even worse that you lost like 18 months of your life for an ex. Whether maybe it was before they were broken up or after, or maybe it might have just been like her ex was into that, and maybe she was aware and broke it off, but like when she got busted, they made a correlation of like, oh, this is who your ex is into drugs, and she got labeled with that, It's that whole situation of no good deed going unpunished when she goes to stop a robbery and ends up getting busted for it. It's like, oh, can't do anything. That just sucks. And then what was really interesting is when Sophie's kind of giving her the third degree, and after it's like, all right, well, it turns out your story is true. It's like, I get why Jacob Kane won't go after Alice, but then it's like why I'm getting treated differently than like someone like Alice, because you're worry about someone like me, yet someone like Alice is able to run free. And then like it's like, well, he turned her back on her like ages ago or whatever, like whatever feelings he had disappear ages ago. And she's like, what? It's like, what are you talking about? I was like, what are you talking about? It's because Alice is white. I was like, oh, because even I was like, wait, does she know about that? And it's like, no, but she ends up ultimately figuring it out, because she was like, wait, what? When she listened to what Sophie says, and she ends up confronting Mary about it. And once again, there's that commonality you both have, where it's like, because it's bad enough where it's like you let someone like Alice run free. It's like, that's why Jacob hasn't, taken her down, because that's his long lost daughter. But it's like, Mary, this whole situation, and I think that's an interesting element for Mary, is that her feelings of wanting Alice dead. I mean, it's not like they'd ever go away. You're never going to like forget the person that killed your mom, especially put you and your mom in such a like messed up dilemma and got such a kick and joy out of it. But it's also the thing of like, Kate was kind of the one thing that kind of kept that back to a certain degree, because I think because she believed in Kate and she believed in what Kate represented. So it's like, if Kate's not going to kill her, I still want her dead, but it's like, it's not the right thing to do. But Ryan wants to track her down, because it's like, I'll get justice for both of our moms. Because of her, my mom's dead. Because of her, your mom's dead. It's like, let me do this. But at the same time, Alice is concocting her own plan. I was thinking that was interesting when she was using Mouse's body. It didn't cross my mind, like, what are you doing, like, letting those bats eat him, which is ironic in the grand scheme of things. Because we also end up finding out that both Alice and Ryan both don't like bats. Ironic in a sense, in both regards. But I think it's also, if I'm not mistaken, Bruce didn't like bats either. That's why he chose bats as a symbol, meant to be like using his own fear as a weapon. He doesn't. His fear of bats. He kind of shrouds himself in that to scare criminals as well, to be the symbol of both hope and fear. So I don't think it ever came up that Kate didn't like bats. Did it? Not that I remember. I could be misremembering. Maybe something did come up in season 1. I'm just not remembering. But still, I didn't talk about it, but I think it is interesting circumstances that it wasn't the bullet wound that I thought that was going to bring her. Be like, yeah, could you check this out for me? Because I think for her, she's probably like, ugh, this is must have been some weird bullet. Now it's like, because she doesn't realize it's kryptonite imprinted. Because I brought it up last episode. I was like, I didn't know kryptonite could like poison humans, but I guess it's like any foreign substance in your body. I mean, we're literally talking about a rock comprised of another planet. So, it has adverse effects on Kryptonians. Obviously, I made the example of like, well, obviously we know it can have adverse effects on humans because of Smallville, but once again, that's kind of Smallville's canon. I don't think that's typically any other Superman canon. I mean, at least that I'm aware of. Like, I mean, I'm basing this just on TV shows and movies and maybe the animated series. I think Smallville's the only one that's ever done anything like that with Kryptonite, but, so I'm curious to see, like, so she's not thinking too much of it. She's just like, oh, let me get some, like, not name brand, like, meds to, like, like ibuprofen or something to, like, help with this. So she's not thinking too much of it, but it's, like, getting worse and worse as she's just letting it sink. Like I said, she just thinks, like, it'll clear up after a while. She thinks it's probably just, like, a regular infection when, in fact, it's not. Then you had the whole situation I thought was kind of interesting where it's like Jacob is like being, trashed in the media because it's like, yeah, footage leaked about the whole trappy set for Batwoman. So it's like now a whole bunch of people have rallied and gathered because they're like, bring back the Bat, and it's especially got to make him feel even more guilty because now it's like, oh, not only did I shoot at, if it was one thing, if it was just a Batwoman in general, but I find out, wait, that was my own daughter I was shooting at. Like, it's going to leave you with regrets, especially because it's being thrown in your face constantly. So the city's just a constant reminder of, in his mind, probably like, oh, I failed as a dad because I shot at my own daughter. Like, what could have been going through her mind? What could she have been dealing with at that time, knowing, that I turned against her like that? So all that regret. So him and Sophie got Luke and Mary and they're like interrogating them, and he's like asking Mary, he's like, you didn't know? And she's like, really? Me and Kate have never been close, which is ironic because this whole circumstance, obviously she's trying to hide it, but it's like, ironically, the whole Batwoman thing actually brought them closer together than they ever been, like, because she prior to now, she had always kept Mary at a distance, but like the whole Batwoman thing, at finding out she runs the clinic and everything, it made her see a different side of Mary, and they actually grew super close over the course of this. So, that's kind of the irony behind the whole statement about like, yeah, like Kate would ever trust me with the Batwoman thing, which obviously she initially didn't. Mary ended up figuring it out on her own, but still. And then like Sophie's grilling Luke about the whole thing. It's like, you were, it's like, yeah, I was persistent. It's like, well, I guess she didn't tell a lot of people in her lives. I mean, even, look at someone like you. It was kind of throwing shade, basically, like, oh, look at someone like you who, supposedly loved her, should have had her back under these circumstances. And just Sophie's like, oh, we're done. It's like, and obviously Julia's getting that third degree too, because it's like, it wasn't my secret to tell. It's like, yeah, but it's like, it's compounded upon like all the other secrets Julia had. To be fair, she's a Pennyworth, so it's like, it's not just Kate's secret she's keeping. She's also keeping Bruce's secret. So it's like, it's a family thing. So it's kind of like, it's in her to keep that secret because like, but also it's like, Kate wouldn't want you to know, hence why she didn't. Well, but to be fair, Kate did leave the letter because she was thinking, like, on some level that, Sophie was going to figure it out anyway. So, but you have Alice confronting Julia saying, like, hey, we should work together about this whole Sophia thing because, she killed my sister, which is like, she's immediately thinking, like, well, Sophia has Kate. Kate's obviously dead, but even what I thought was interesting, even Julia was like, the whole bringing down a plane wasn't Sophia's style. And obviously Alice is making the whole comparison of like, well, basically people have to kind of adapt and change, which begs the question, like, that is interesting that this is the route she went down. I'm wondering, like, we still don't know the full connections between everybody, like, how deep Julia and Sophia's history runs, as well as Sophia and Alice. I'm assuming it's sometime after she became Alice that they crossed paths. Maybe Sophia had taken her under her wing, and so it probably wasn't just Kate's return to Gotham that was what it was. It was probably also Alice's return to Gotham was probably meant to be something else. It seems like I'm kind of getting League of Assassin vibes. Kind of similar how, like, the whole thing that Ra's was trying to get Oliver to do to destroy Star City. Like, kind of that, where it's like you have to basically, before you join the League, you have to destroy your home. I was wondering, was it kind of a similar thing? Because I don't know. because there's that Tatiana at the end, who was basically like the poison that Alice used, which we'll get to soon enough. It's like, it wasn't meant for that. And on top of that, you cure the entire city too. So it's like, I guess it was meant to be like very, maybe a very powerful weapon. Like, it wasn't meant to be used in such a quote unquote, I guess, petty way as just going after Gotham. Maybe it had like a bigger purpose. The Desert Rose, it's probably like a super rare poison. So like, to waste any of it, or that might have been like the last one. So it was meant to be for something special, and Alice just kind of wasted it. I don't know. We'll see kind of where things kind of go from there. But I also appreciate both Julia and Mary both throwing it in Alice's face that the reason why she's doing what she's doing is because, in a twisted way, she is missing Kate. Because all this bravado about like, oh, I'll kill Kate, but the moment like Kate's not around, you do miss her. Like, that's why you're trying to do this. It's not just because it's like, oh, you took my chance to take to have this poetic justice. It's like, in your own way, this twisted game you were playing with Kate you had set up, it's like it was a means of keeping Kate in your life. Because even Julia threw it out there, like, Kate was the only person that still believed in you. Everyone else, like, no one else believes in you like that. Hence, I mean, Mary doesn't have, like I brought up earlier, Mary doesn't have Kate there to kind of balance out her anger towards her. Like, Kate was the only one that was trying to redeem Alice in some shape or form. It's like, but without her, you kind of have no one. Especially now that Mouse is dead, she's all alone. You know, I mean, to be fair, she killed Mouse way before, obviously, she ended up finding out about Kate. But still, it's just like, now she kind of has no one. I mean, hell, she even used Mouse's body as a sign. Because at first I was like, oh, was that just the sole purpose to, you know, see the mouse being bitten up by rats? But then it was also like bats. But it was like, oh yeah, it's also he was killed. I didn't realize, it didn't correlate in my head in the season 1 finale. It was the same poison she used to kill Castor. But then it's like, oh, now like all those other bats were infected with it from biting Mouse. And I was like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting things to kind of go down that route. And this ends up being part of Alice's big plan. I wasn't really sure how, I mean, granted, you never really know what's going through Alice's mind, but obviously we now know it's like, oh, the whole thing was orchestrated to get Sophia's attention. So on top of that, like, obviously they knew at first it was going to be a large gathering of people. So she has to dress up as Batwoman. It's like, well, Julia did it before, but it's like, well, we can't really do that now because she's not in the best condition. It's like, well, you have Ryan being like, I'll do it. And it's like, excuse me, you're forgetting one particular thing. It's like, yeah, but we'll be far away. People won't be able to tell. So she kind of, and I even love like her being like, okay, how do I stand? And like Mary kind of giving her tips on how like the stand is like, oh, like let like the cape flow in just the right way with the moonlight and everything. And you even have Luke looking at her like, you're giving her like superhero pose tips. I love that. But obviously Jacob finds out like what he looks and sees. Oh, it's not, because it's like, oh, Kate, and it's like, it's not Kate. Whoever that imposter is, take them down. Then Alice showing up and them duking it out, and obviously, both Mary and Ryan wanting her dead. But it's also like, yes, I get it, you want her dead, but at the same time, it's like, this isn't Batwoman. Are you willing to tarnish Kate's legacy? The Bat legacy on like killing someone, But with the bats and everything, they kind of she has to put that aside to save the day. So at first I thought she was going to sacrifice the Batmobile when she would say like, yeah, you're not going to like it. But it's like, well, I guess the whole thing was using the Batmobile as a beacon, with the device and everything to draw them. I guess that's kind of what she was like, you're not going to like it. And well, neither one of us are going to like it. Me with the bats, me using the Batmobile like this. But luckily they were able to dispose of, well, she was able to luckily like put them all in the bus and ended up exploding them. But that moment where it's like, Batwoman, she's telling the girl, like, no, I'm not really Batwoman. She's like, you are to me. And it's like, in that moment, because much like what Batwoman meant, to just not just that in that city. It's like, this city's been through this before. It went 3 years without a Batman. Just when it had its new light, to lose it like that again. And Ryan even think about the 2 month prior, it's like what that meant for her, like being saved by Batwoman, also even helping her, and for Ryan, she wants this. She wants to be that symbol of hope, because I think because of her own circumstances, she knows what it's like to, obviously she's lived on the streets of Gotham, where it's like, I know what it's like to be hopeless. This city needs hope. We were able to give a little bit more hope back to this city. We can't stop now. And what was interesting is also from her perspective too, it's like, because of my experience of being around criminals, she had even tried to use this as a means of getting a job. It's like, I've been around enough criminals because of my 18-month stint that I know how to read faces. I can understand criminals and how they operate. So I think that's going to be interesting, because obviously it adds this element. Because I think Kate came from this situation kind of, she came from it from a Crow perspective. And now Ryan's kind of coming from this as a quote-unquote criminal perspective, even though she was innocent. I'm assuming that storyline's going to come back up in some shape or form. Obviously, about her ex-lady and everything, around the circumstances of what got her in trouble in the first place, So, obviously, Ryan bringing up, like, the two best things that ever happened in her life was, for one, her mom adopting her, and two, finding a Batsuit. But even being like, I think it was the other way around. The Batsuit found me. It's almost like, it gave her, I think, a second chance at, doing things. Wanting to do right by this city, wanting to do right by her mom, and also in, doing right by Kate. And I thought that was a pretty dope thing. Obviously, Kate has been writing journals to, Bruce, and for her to be now writing one towards Kate, I think that's kind of nice to make that kind of come full circle like that. So I thought that was pretty dope. So I'm interested. Obviously, we're continuing along this route. I'm interested to see, how Ryan's story continues to go and grow. Obviously, once again, you have Luke, who's a little reserved about it, but to me, I think that's the beauty of it, because he was super reserved about having, not just reserved, kind of super against Kate taking up the Bat mantle, and now for someone else to, it's like, fine, you can keep it until Kate's a lot back, because obviously even Mary's kind of slipping into that lane of, I don't know if Kate's actually alive or not, but her dad is like, I can't go through this a second time. I gave up on Beth, because even Mary had said that to Alice. It's like, you know better than anyone what it's like for, like, just because there's no body, that doesn't mean anything. You were alive, obviously, the entire time. So the same thing for Kate, but obviously, for Alice, it's the whole thing of not wanting to get your hopes up, because she held on to hope for so long just for that despair to seep in, and she's not trying to. She's trying to hide it, but yeah, as Mary pointed out, that despair is there. That there is a part of her that is sad and torn up in her own twisted way. So it's going to be interesting to see the new dynamics that are created with these circumstances. You even have Sophie being like, "Oh, who's the new Batwoman?" And even Julia's like, "Honestly, I don't know," which that is truthful, but obviously it's like she's in a position where it's like, you don't really trust me right now. But it's like, did Kate tell you she loved you in the letter? It's like, why does it matter? It's like, well, I want to know, are we not together anymore because you don't trust me? Or is it because I'm not Kate? And it's like, both. And it's like, oh, that's a gut punch. So I'm curious to see, where these intertwining stories go from here, learning more about Sophia and her whole deal. I'm sure that's going to be a thing that kind of gets stringed along over the course of the season. Because obviously Mary and Luke are still unaware of that being the connection in this regard. The whole Sophia thing. So I'm sure she's being set up to be the big bad of this season. So I'm curious to learn about her circumstances and who she is. So, but really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.